All right, today we're diving into a pretty wild text that lays out a hidden power structure, one it claims is operating right out in the open. The argument? That the Vatican isn't just a religious hub, but a major pillar in a global system of control. So let's start peeling back the layers.
So let's just get right to the big question this text is asking. When you think of the Vatican, you probably picture history, religion, beautiful art. But what if there's something else going on? This source wants us to look at it in a completely different way, not just as a holy place, but as a sovereign, global corporation.
And that really brings us to the core concept of this whole argument. It basically says, hey, let's set aside the purely religious view for a second and frame the Vatican as a type of corporation. And what's its business? Well, according to this text, it's the business of faith itself.
Here's how the source breaks it down. Because the Vatican is a sovereign city-state, it's basically an independent corporation. Now, the key part of this idea is that it allegedly operates outside the legal systems, what the text calls the profane laws, of every other country. That gives it this really unique power and autonomy.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. In this theory, the Vatican isn't acting alone. Nope, the source claims it's just one of three key players in a massive global structure that it calls the game. So who are the other two? Let's take a look. So here they are, the three independent city-states that supposedly run the show. You've got Washington, D.C., called the Fist, which controls the world's military might. Then there's the City of London, nicknamed the Mind, handling all the finance and law. And finally, you have the Vatican, the Soul, which is in charge of faith and ancient knowledge. These three, according to the theory, are the pillars of global control. Okay, so let's zoom in on the Vatican's role here, and specifically, its leader. The source argues that the title of Pope and all the symbols that go with it, well, they're not what they seem. They're actually presented as codes, hiding a much deeper meaning. So take the word Pope itself. We think we know what it means, but this text suggests an entirely different interpretation. It claims the title is actually a cipher for pole or pillar, which would reinforce the Pope's role as the leader of a central pillar in this whole global structure. And what about those famous crossed keys you see everywhere? Well, the source decodes them too. The gold key, that's the sun. The silver key, that's the moon. And put together, they supposedly create a diagram of something called a reunion eclipse, a really important cosmic event. This would make the Pope the keeper of the keys to a huge global event the text calls the Great Reset. Now, the argument doesn't stop with words and symbols. The source says that the Vatican's own architecture is like a giant public confession, a blueprint of its secret purpose carved right into the stone for anyone to see, if you just know how to read it. Let's start with that massive obelisk in the middle of St. Peter's Square. What's so special about it? Well, according to this text, it's not just that it's ancient, it's that it is the one ancient obelisk that has never fallen down. And that, it claims, symbolizes the eternal, unbroken lore that the Vatican is protecting. And then you have the Fontana della Pina, the giant pine cone fountain. I mean, a pine cone. Why? Well, this text says it's not just some random decoration. It's a monument to the pineal gland, the third eye. So in this view, that giant pine cone is a symbol for divine sight and secret knowledge.
And maybe the most mind-blowing claim is about St. Peter's Square itself. If you look at it from above, you can't miss it. It's shaped like a giant keyhole. The source actually calls this a literal architectural confession, a public declaration that the Vatican is the lock, holding the secrets to some kind of cosmic key.
Okay, so let's try and pull all of this together. We've got a sovereign corporation, a keeper of coded keys, an architecture that's telling a secret story. So what is the Vatican's ultimate role in this whole global power trio, according to the source?
Let's look at those three pillars again. You have the Fist, for military power, the Mind, for financial power, and then you have the Vatican's domain, the Soul. According to this text, controlling faith and belief isn't just 1/3 of the pie. It's the spiritual bedrock that the entire structure is built on.
So here it is, the bottom line. The source concludes that the Vatican acts as the spiritual heart of the game. It's not just a religious place. It's the central library for sacred knowledge and the main stage for the ancient rituals that supposedly keep this whole system running. And we're going to end with what is probably the source's most powerful and provocative line. It claims that the leaders of this system present themselves as the benevolent shepherds of a flock they secretly see as cargo. That is a really stark image to leave you with. And it makes you wonder, right? What really is the connection between power, faith, and the stories we're all told?